Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rhonda, Studnick, Kaiser, and I'll be hosting our BigFix Decoded webinar today on BigFix Explorer. We are recording today's webinar. If this presents you with any concerns, please drop at this time. You'll be able to access a recording of the event about an hour after we conclude. You'll simply follow the same registration link that you used to get to join us, and you'll instead access a recording of the event. You can also share your link with colleagues who might not have been able to join. They'll be presented with that same registration page, and then we'll be able to access the recording. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the course of the event today. Just add your questions to the question box, and we'll either answer them directly in the dialogue there, or we'll feed your question to our presenters at the appropriate time. First, though, let me introduce you to our presenters today. Gary, if you can go to the next slide, please. With me, as always, are John Talbert, Director of BigFix Professional Services, and Joe Saylor, BigFix Accelerated Value Program Senior Architect, and all things BigFix. And also Gary Louw, who is from our BigFix Professional Services team. Gary's been doing a lot of spelunking in the caves of BigFix Explorer, which is a new feature of BigFix version 11, and that's where we're going to focus today. We'll talk about the origin of this new component, some of the key use cases it was designed to face, and take you on a brief tour of the functionality. Now, if you're a BigFix administrator and your organization really likes to augment their operational activities with details from BigFix, you're going to find this very helpful. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to John to kick us off.
Thanks, Rhonda. So as we were prepping for this, we spent some time with one of our developers who and asked them some strategic questions around kind of BigFix Explorer, the why did we build it in the first place? As part of building out our new SaaS, BigFix SaaS Remediate, BigFix Remediate on SaaS, BigFix SaaS Remediate. I don't know exactly how the words go together, but it's a new SaaS environment that's targeted kind of for our smaller IT shop space. But having SaaS and have it be performant, we were finding that we needed to have a way to interface better with the back end of BigFix and get things into a UI that was good, highly performant at scale. So that's where BigFix Explorer came in. That's what it was designed for. And most of the people on this call probably aren't SaaS customers and aren't interested in the SaaS space, as you're probably pretty mature, have on-prem or your own cloud instances. But you probably could take advantage of Explorer. There's some trickle-down benefits, and we want to kind of flesh those out and talk through those today. So when we're thinking about the BigFix Explorer, it's a command line session relevance engine that's backed by an in-memory database. It's designed to be separate from the root server and to keep general query load off of the root server. If you think about like console load and whatnot, keeping that off of the root server so the root server can do its day-to-day digestion and ingestion and injection into the database of all the incoming data from the endpoints. And we've already got, say, web reports that does a similar thing, but it does it in a very different context. We'll spend some time talking later in the session about some of the differences there. Joe, what other things, what other happy side effects did I not hit?
Yeah, I mean, one little tidbit there you just mentioned with the in-memory database that BigFix Explorer uses, it's completely database free. There's a couple of little SQLite databases that are just kind of text files on there that it doesn't really use that much. But one of the great annoyances of setting up additional web reports instances is that it needs a SQL engine. It has to have SQL behind it, right? So Explorer instances completely do away with that requirement. So really, really neat side effect there. As a self-professed scaling nerd, I am very interested in how the performance benefits are going to play out with this. I think that, as a SaaS offering where we have to have many, many operators and many, many endpoints, this thing is engineered from the ground up to be faster. So I really look forward to seeing how that plays out. That's going to be great. One other little interesting thing here is that you now have the option of having JSON results instead of XML results. So today the API always comes out with an XML response. And so developers have to, kind of work around that. And in the Explorer world, we now have the option of having JSON results. So, if you're already working with JSON everywhere, you have that option rather than having to convert stuff around. So that's, those are the little interesting tidbits I am super interested in. Gary, you have all sorts of things to show us. What do you want to start with?
Well, let's begin with how do we deploy an instance of Explorer, and just bear with me. At the end of the day, we have fixlets that make the deployment pretty simple. One thing that I would just draw our attention to is when we deploy an instance, we can choose the port that we are going to use for that application to listen on. And we can also specify whether that service that gets installed is run under the system account or through any other unprivileged user account. Basically, when the service is launched, it is going to connect to the root server through APIs. It's going to query content and other information from the root server and then hold that in memory so that when our queries are executed, they run pretty quickly. So we have a few additional fixlets which are fairly common amongst all of our components, right? We can post deployment, come back and change the port. We can increase log levels. We can upgrade the instance of Explorer with a new release. And of course, we can uninstall that Explorer instance. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. So what I did want to mention is there's the documentation, of course, which we always provide for our products. There's an interesting little blog that you can reference and read up a little bit more about Explorer itself. This diagram actually is quite illustrative in terms of, do I need to change my processes? If I have some automation today where I have some queries already designed and developed and I target my root server, does this alter anything in any way? And the simple answer is no, it does not alter it. It does allow you for additional choices or selections when creating your queries and targeting an endpoint to provide the results of that query. So you could continue going through the root server, which in turn would forward it to an Explorer instance instead of to the web report server. You could also optionally go directly to an Explorer instance, and there are many reasons why you may want to do that. So I've already shown you some of the deployment fixlets. One caveat, we cannot deploy the Explorer service on the root server itself. And as Joe has already mentioned, we don't require any SQL server licensing or deployments of a database. And so this is completely database free. We have additions to an analysis which would show us the versions of the Explorer instance that's deployed. I will just mention that this component was released in 11.02 and then further enhanced in version 11.03. It is possible that you would have some mix of versions, but once you've upgraded your deployment to 11.03, you can no longer install an 1102 instance of Explorer. You can only then install 1103, and in fact, you would have to upgrade any existing 1102 instances so that they support the new 1103 functionality.
And so, Gary, I noticed that there's an 1102 and 1103 installer. I assume that means we have to be version locked with the root server. Is that correct?
That is true. Yes, yes, that is true. So I might question why that 1102 fixlet is still relevant, but when you look at it, it has a requirement. When you look at the install fixlet for 1103 that requires an environment of 1103, the 1102, from my personal experience, and I don't say this is by design by any means, it may just have been the environment that I deployed in my home lab and the mix of queries that I was testing with. But when I did have an 1102 Explorer instance after my deployment upgrade, my particular queries failed. I'm not too sure that that is a design point or something environmental with my test cases. By the way, the Explorer instance can be deployed on either Linux or on Windows. And if you do deploy it on Linux, when we had the component initially announced on 1102, you did require an additional ODBC RPM package deployed on your Red Hat server. That is no longer required in 1103, so they've done away with that requirement, which would simplify the deployment for you. When you look at the resources that are required, it's very much in line with the Web Reports instance, with the exception that we don't require any resources for a database.
So not a very heavy server.
Yeah, that's
not at all.
Yeah, mentally, that's a real easy comparison. So if you're doing this type of thing, some customers have multiple web report servers for load balancing. You could do the same sort of concept with these Explorer servers.
Right. So again, typical of most of our components, we do have the ability to manage these instances either through API calls or through fixlet actions or through the BezAdmin tool. So for example, we could configure it to use a CA sign certificate. We can revoke or rotate internal authentication certificates, which, by the way, is just another measure of implementing security for that Explorer instance, which could be deployed anywhere within your environment, but at least you do have the comfort that any transmission is authenticated with certificates.
It's really nice to see that we, as in HCL development, have really taken to heart all the lessons we've learned over the years, that our customers need custom certificates on all of these like semi-publicly available pieces of server software, and we're just implementing them straight out of the gate. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
There's a question I want to hit real quick from the queue, and question was, is it recommended BigFix Explorer should be installed on its own machine, or can we install it alongside the root server or web UI server, etc.? And my answer there was, generally we're trying to get load off of the root with this thing, so you wouldn't want to put it on the root server, generally speaking. I don't think there's a thing that would stop you if you're doing it like in non-prod and you just want to test it out. It should work. But the goal is to get it off the root server. So putting it alongside of another web report server or on the BigFix inventory or on its own standalone, all would be valid choices. Any inputs to that?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, oh, go
sorry,
ahead,
Joe,
Gary.
go ahead. That's absolutely true, John. I mean, one consideration would be the end user or the automation that's submitting these queries. Do they have any network constraints? So, for example, would they be able to hit the root server, or would they have to go to a specific instance that's deployed in their region? So it's giving you that flexibility.
Yeah, and performance-wise, just consider that you need to have, a couple of cores and a fair bit of RAM available for just this process. And so if you want to throw it on a web reports box that exists already, you can certainly do that, but just be aware that it's going to consume, another web reports worth of process. Most of our throttling, most of our performance issues are more around parallelism. So the single thread on web reports is kind of our limiting factor there. So you would gain additional performance benefits from having both Explorer and web reports on the same box, since we would have that additional thread on both sides.
Probably need to think about memory because it's memory intensive. But yeah, it's a good point.
There is a question about in memory, what the memory requirements are, and I don't know if we know that offhand. It looks like maybe that's not in our user's guide. So if you guys know, would be great to answer that. If not, we'll follow up.
It's exactly web reports requirements. So it's more around which queries you're going to be running. So just like web reports, if you have fairly simple queries that don't return massive data sets, you may only see like 4 gigabytes worth of memory usage off of it. But if you want to return something like, all installed Windows applications for every computer in your environment, that alone will build up the database to like 40 gigabytes on its own, right? So be sensitive to what you're throwing at it. Individual large queries will bloat the memory for sure. But in general, the memory requirement is very similar to web reports.
Yeah, and that's a correct observation in terms of the documentation. I do not see anything as a minimum requirement in terms of memory, but it would be relative to the deployment where this instance of Explorer is deployed.
So there's a question around memory specifically, and it's is there like a limit to how much an Explorer will use? And I'm pretty sure it's 64-bit, and so it would be the 64-bit memory space cap, which is like petabytes.
All of your memory, yes.
Yeah, the 4 gig memory slot is a 32-bit thing, so I don't think we're going to hit any limits there. I'll double check on that for the person who asked, and we'll get back to you on it.
So as part of this discussion so far, we've been talking about having multiple instances. Now, if you choose to have multiple instances, and you can have as many as you want, deployed throughout your regions or throughout your subnets, we can specify the priority for the particular instance that we would like to quote unquote replace web reports, right? So if my automation still hits the root server on the root server port using the API query resource, the root server in turn will redirect, or not redirect is maybe the wrong word, it will forward that query to whichever specific Explorer instance has the highest priority. That's really just to take care of queries that target the root server specifically. You can, of course, target any Explorer instance explicitly by way of the URL to that instance. So we'll show a little bit more about that later. but ultimately the single instance with the highest priority is the one that queries will get forwarded to from the root server. Okay, so maybe we should have a look at some of
Actually, there was a relevant question there, Gary. It was about how it is that we see any performance benefits by targeting the root server at all between sending it to a web report server versus an Explorer server. Doesn't the root server have to do the database query anyway?
Doesn't the root server have to do the database query anyway?
I'll take a swing at that one. So if you think about how the REST API query works now, when REST API query hits the root server, it then would redirect to web reports and get the answer back from web reports. In the new model, it would hit the Explorer instance and get the answer back from Explorer, but it's still got to do some routing there. In the kind of skipping ahead to later in the show, you can actually hit Explorer directly with your query and not even go through the root server anymore. So that's going to be the golden ticket.
And one of the key bits of understanding is that the API has never done any processing on the root server. So even in like 10 or 11, the web reports instance did all of the big heavy lifting, and the root server just kind of passed the data back and forth. One little tidbit here that's super interesting is part of the performance benefits that we've realized are because there is this hidden tax whenever web reports has to translate an API query, where you may be aware that web reports is like they have their own users, and those users have their own viewpoint. They're not the same as a console user. So today, web reports has to translate the console user's view with the web reports view. And there's a tax there where it does that translation. So the Explorer instance is purely native console user point of view, and we never have to do any of that translation. So that's a part of where we get our performance benefits from.
Something that I took from that question, and I may be wrong, was load time, right? So when you launched web reports or Explorer during startup, it is going to load data into memory. So it's basically pre-caching data. I don't know the details of Explorer. I don't know how much it pre-caches. And my assumption is it would pre-cache everything that would be required for the queries that it supports, but I could be wrong. But yes, at the time that that component starts and loads up data, then the root server would be querying the database. But I don't know during actual queries, so I don't know if I interpreted the question correctly or not.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
There's one more piece that we haven't touched. It was a good topical question a little bit ago, and that was, is Explorer FIPS compliant? And I don't know the answer to that one. So, do we know? I'll go and I will find out, and we'll get an answer back.
Yeah, I'm. If anything, it would be in the documentation somewhere. Yeah, so it should tell us. I don't want to spend too much time on it right here and now. But
you can definitely tell our labs do not require any government compliance.
Yes. Okay, so I think where we had got to was basically some of the session relevance itself, right? So what I did want to just mention is we're all familiar with queries that look like this, right, which we target to the root server. And that is still supported. We can still certainly submit queries through the root server, which will get forwarded to the Explorer instance, and you're going to get your results as normal. But there is also a number of enhancements. Some were released in 11.02, and additional enhancements were released in 11.03. So essentially, not only is the output returned in JSON format, but your query is also going to be structured in JSON. And we've introduced an additional header type. If I can find an example of it, I will show you when we actually submit a query. But there is a change to the actual query itself, both in terms of the structure of the query, in terms of the enhancements that have been made. One of the enhancements, and again, I'm struggling to find a quick example, is the concept of a key. So I can query certain property values, and when the data is returned, it can be represented in a more user-friendly or meaningful way. So I can create a key with my own unique value. Think of it as a label. And then that label would contain a certain property value. And I can have multiple keys. That is in 11.02. 11.03 has now given us filtering capabilities, which is great. So there are some constraints around it. It's documented. There are certain properties that we can use in filtering. But by structuring your query correctly, you can filter on the results and just expose the data that you specifically want.
So this is like super cool, like beyond cool. So I don't know how much session relevance writing you guys have been doing just in your career, but today it can get scary complicated trying to filter out like disparate object types, right? So it's pretty easy if I have, if I'm looking for BES computers and I just want to filter out computers that only have a certain property, right? And I'm all inside the BES computers context, relatively easy to do with session relevance. You still have to kind of know what you're doing. But if I'm looking at like actions and I need to filter out computers that have a certain property, suddenly that gets harder and you have to just like know where to put the who's filter, and it's like in a different spot every time. And as you start nesting stuff, it gets more and more and more complicated until eventually like my poor meat processor just can't do it. Like it can't keep up with what's going on in the session relevance. I may be exposing exactly how stupid I am here. I'm not sure. But this new filter stuff allows you to externalize all of that. So you can have like this very simple query that just returns the actions you want. And Gary, I don't know if you want to sneak back to the presentation document we had going, slide 5, I think it was, just to kind of illustrate this.
My PDF or your
the one with the intro, the intro document one.
Sorry, bear with me. I have to quickly find where that went. I think it's this one. Yeah. So yeah. Do you want me to go forward a slide?
Yeah, 2 more.
This one?
Wait.
Or the following one?
1 more. There we go. So this is a little bit of an example of where you put stuff, right? So in the top query, that's just how you do it today with session relevance. In order to filter by the computer name, I have to kind of put it in a weird spot, and I have to kind of know where that filter is already. In the Explorer filter, you can see in that bottom section, we just have a computers filter, and that can be any set of BES computers, and it will filter the results from the top session relevance, like the parent session relevance statement. And so instead of having to do just like a massive number of who's it results, concatenation of, etc., as I'm sure you've all had to do before, and kind of like bang your head against the wall, putting them in the right spot, you just say, hey, I want these computers against these results, and that's it. There's no more complication to it after that. So real excited about how like simple this is going to make session relevance relative to how it works today. And of course, scaling nerd-wise, it's super easy to shoot yourself in the foot with session relevance. Like you can make something that's super difficult for the server to process and just very expensive. Like it's super easy to make a session relevance statement that takes 40 minutes for it to process. But with the filters being discrete, you'll never run into that problem. You won't ever accidentally instantiate, 7 million computer instances in your session relevance because it's all just neatly laid out for you. Sorry, I took us on a ride there, Gary. Back to you.
It's all good. It's all good. Every bit of information is useful. So I'm just going to go through a bit of a cheat sheet just so that I don't forget something. But basically, from a management perspective, I can quite easily query what instances do I have currently deployed. Sorry, that was I knew there was going to be a typo. So here I can see the URL for two particular instances that I currently have deployed. This is the host name of the first instance with the URL to that instance, and then of course the host name of the second instance with the URL to that instance. When we deploy the instances, they have a priority of 0, so they're all kind of at the same priority level. If I query any single instance, for example, this one, I have already adjusted this particular one. The way in which I could adjust this one, or the way in which I do adjust this one, is to create a JSON or an XML file, that contains the priority of the instance that will be adjusted when I target that particular instance. So if I go back and query my second instance, that is likely 0 because it was a default deployment.
Gary, while you're typing about, there was a question earlier about why was the response in XML and not JSON, and I missed exactly when it came in, so it looks like it was maybe 2 minutes ago.
Maybe it was when I was querying the instance itself. So it's not session relevance. It wasn't a session relevance query. It was a query of the instance to return the details of that instance. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, so there's the new JSON format is only for Explorer return data. And a lot of the stuff we're doing here is platform API results, which are still only in XML. So if we're talking to the root server with any API that isn't the new JSON format, so in order to get JSON to trigger, you have to supply a JSON document. So anytime you're supplying an XML document or no document, you still have an XML response.
Very good. I think that covers it. There were a couple others since I've interrupted. Did your one was around customer has an external tool that does a big a large gather of 1,500 clients' results every hour or so. And there was a question around how much RAM you might expect. Again, we're gonna point you back to whatever your web reports is doing today is probably the RAM you'll need for an equivalent of Explorer. And Joe, thanks for picking that one up. And then if you can directly query Explorer, does it keep a copy of that data in its memory by constantly updating its memory content by querying the root server? Does that not do attacks on root? So I'll take that one. Basically, yeah, it's the same tax on root as a console would have or a web report server would have, using the similar keeping the data fresh type of techniques. So you can think of it like a web report server with regards to load on your root server, as well as footprint on your infrastructure.
The only additional comment I'd add to that, John, is so with web reports, I believe you can configure that refresh interval, which by default is 15 seconds. I have not seen anything for Explorer, so I don't know what that is. Okay, so I already showed that this particular instance had a priority of 0. I've shown the XML, which will allow me to modify that priority. I am going to submit the change by way of posting the file that contains that change. And then if I go back and query that instance a second time, I will see that it has been updated. Now, while we are talking about this, and I'm just trying to be conscious of time, I just want to add some additional information around multiple instance deployments. And that's a concept, if you will, of failover. So once, if I'm currently using web reports and I then deploy an instance of Explorer, the queries will automatically get forwarded to the Explorer instance and not the web reports instance. That happens automatically. If I deploy a second and more Explorer instances, if the one with the highest priority goes down, then it will forward to the next highest priority. If they are all at the same priority, I don't actually know how it makes a selection, but your queries will still be serviced. If you lose all of your Explorer instances, it will once again forward the queries back to web reports, but you would only be able to support the queries that web reports supports, so none of the filtering or any of that. I will mention that there could be some time where we have a failure, and I don't like to use the word failover, but in essence, that's the net result that you'll have. It seems to take some time to figure that out, and I don't know quite why, but just be aware it will ultimately forward queries to a different instance, but there might be some lag, and you might see some failures before the forwarding moves across to another instance. I think that may be, again, a result of my test cases. So the way that I was testing it would be to stop a service, run my query, and then of course when I start the service, it has to load up that instance and pre-populate the memory, and that's possibly why my queries failed for a certain period of time until that instance was once again ready and could actually respond to the queries. Okay, so as I've shown you, I have two Explorer instances. The first one is on this machine, and here's the service that's running. The second one is on this machine with the service that's running. And the third one is actually my web reports instance, which I have stopped. I've deliberately stopped it just to ensure that my queries, when I demonstrate them, get serviced by an Explorer instance, just to kind of validate what we've been describing earlier. So I'm going to take a traditional type of relevance query. I'm going to target my root server, the root server port, using the API query resource. And if I show you that actual query, which is this one here, fairly simple, right? Nothing fancy about it, but really all I want to do is just show you that yes, that query, even though I'm targeting my root server in this URL right here, is going to in fact get serviced by one of my Explorer instances. I now have both of them with a priority of 15. So I don't actually know which one has responded this minute, but the query was serviced. I then have a new query, and this is the header type that I was referring to a little bit earlier. So if I look at this query as opposed to the first one, so the first one was that standard kind of query, and this one, sorry guys, I somehow never copy and paste correctly. If I then cat this one, similar, if not exactly the same query, but just kind of structured a little bit differently. And so if I now run this query, but I'm still targeting my root server, that query once again gets forwarded out to a Explorer instance. And so now I get my output in JSON format, and I can pass through that data. Now, this particular query is returning action results for all device types, or all operating systems, should I say, which is a combination of Windows and Linux machines. And just remember the count here is 675. I'm not filtering out anything. It's giving me everything that I have. If I then look at, and I've got to be sure that I'm in the right folder. Let me just make sure by looking at this one. Yeah, so this one, I'm going to filter out Windows and only return Linux systems. This count of 675 should drop theoretically. So let's quickly run that. I'm not too sure which way would have been quicker, but I'll do it here. And my count certainly has dropped almost by half. So the filtering is certainly working. By the way, I did talk about the keys earlier, and this is one key. comprising two pieces of information, the ID of the action and the name of the action. And then this is a second key, which is the computer name that reported in on that action. So I basically just have two keys in this particular query, which is not easy to see, but there are the keys defined with my reported action, two elements to that key, and then my second key with just the computer name.
Gary, if I could interject, there's a couple of questions I want to hit really quick.
Sure.
This is great, by the way. Thank you for demonstrating that query. One of the questions I wanted to hit was a question around what exactly is the use case for Explorer? And at the top of the call, we mentioned that it was designed to support the HCL SaaS BigFix product. That's its use case. It's not for the on-prem customer base that's listening to us now. The reason we're talking about it right now to you is because there's all these nice side effects that we get for free, but it wasn't designed for those side effects. Those are side effects. And the side effects are scale related, especially with API-based custom integrations. And even some of the non-custom integrations are going to benefit from this faster data response that keeps load off of the root server. Joe, you're leaving in.
Yeah, Gary, can you swap back to the presentation?
Of course.
This is a perfect time. So the use case for this, yeah, back one slide. The use case for this.
I'm sorry. There we go. This one, right?
Yeah. So this is the real use case for general platform customers. Anybody currently using the API right now is probably limited in like what they can do because of performance, and our performance is about double. We have doubled the speed of API hits for no additional cost to you, right? This is if you are targeting today your root server with API queries for session relevance. Like these are our numbers. This is in, it's in our test labs, and obviously, there are caveats there. Like maybe it's not exactly the real world, but we've thrown some really big, really inefficient queries at it, and that's our left two columns there, and the speed is it takes about half the time in Explorer. And for small queries, and this impresses me almost even more because very small queries have like a lot of overhead, right? As we even if we just want one line, it still has to like hit the root server, it's got to move over to web reports, and it's got to come back. So there's a ton of overhead, and even on these small queries, it doubled the performance of it, and that's without doing any sort of optimization for like hitting Explorer or using the new filter stuff or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's part of the really cool lean in is all you have to do is deploy Explorer, and it automatically redirects the API calls to use Explorer instead of web reports. So you get this without having to redesign a single piece of your API. Now, in the long term, yeah, you want to look at pivoting the entire API call from hitting your root to hitting Explorer and then getting JSON back instead of XML. And there's going to be some work there, but the short term is you can just install it and get the benefit, and then slowly, one query at a time, move things over to the even slightly more efficient way of hitting Explorer directly. So there's value here.
And, doesn't it also allow you, like if you have like various organizations that want to use APIs, to be able to kind of like segregate APIs into different Explorer instances?
Yeah, one of the
I remembered that.
Yeah, one of the kind of pain points today is that web reports handles all of the API queries, and you have users on your web report server doing stuff, right? So if you have like a ton of really, really big scheduled reports, sometimes you can get some conflicts with these API calls from the root server, and it's all kind of sequential, and sometimes you end up waiting. Sometimes you push a scheduled report back farther than you want, and people start complaining, right? So Explorer completely offloads that, and now you don't have any sort of contention between the two. Your users are happy, and your API users are also happy.
Yeah, and maybe something that you don't consider upfront is maintenance, right? I don't have the same level of maintenance database backups, making sure that my reports are available, migration issues, if I ever need to migrate that. So it really simplifies my deployment in terms of queries specifically. It allows me to position an instance that makes sense network-wise or end-user community-wise. Lowers my financial costs with SQL Server licensing, the maintenance aspect of all of it. So there's a number of reasons, really.
Yeah, and the network security part of it is kind of a sneaky benefit as well. You can target the Explorer instances directly, and that gives you the benefit that you don't have to expose your root server to API users. And so they can get to it from they can get to the same data, but from different network segments. And anytime I can close off my root server to traffic, like that just makes me happier, right? Like I'm all about these security benefits and, kind of DMZing off any sort of sensitive like data connection it makes me happy.
So let me pivot off of that. There was a question I have not answered yet, and that was on plans to use any secrets or tokens for the authentication of those API requests instead of just basic account auth like we've been seeing in the demo. And I don't know that one.
As far as I'm aware, no, that is not a short-term thing that I am aware of. Please enter an idea for it. Like, we should drive traffic to that. I agree. Yeah. I don't really like this NTLM style basic authentication. It really kind of wants you to be local inside your network already, and then you have to like protect it, protect your name and password on your own. I concur.
Yeah. I don't know that that's implemented in any of our applications.
Well, we do have like Inventory's API allows you to tokenize, and I think
the API. Sorry, yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tokenization, I think, makes sense in the long term, but I think they maybe they maybe aren't using it in SaaS, so they haven't prioritized it. So yes, an idea there and leaning in on that will help it get the attention and maybe get it floated closer to the top and closer to tomorrow instead of next year. I think it'll eventually come, even if we don't push on it. And the FIPS question is still at not getting an answer back from Dev. I will loop back around once we get that answer.
Okay, yeah. I really only had maybe one or two simple queries, but I think in essence we've demonstrated everything that I really wanted to demonstrate, and I think the performance measurements here speak for themselves and are very significant. I personally don't have much more to present. If there are any further questions, or Joe or John, anything that you want to add?
We are clear on the queue, and I think we hit. Joe, did you talk about the nature of the tax difference between web reports and Explorer? Did you already cover that one?
We did, yes.
Okay, fantastic. I was pivoted on FIPS at the moment. I think I missed that detail. I can't think of any other of the points that we wanted to touch. I think we hit them all.
Now that's amazing. Wonderful. Well, Gary, Joe, John, thank you guys so much for pulling all this together. I love showing new technology, and this is one of those things that we get these amazing benefits. It's on the road to new functionality, but we get these amazing benefits with our current activities. And like I said, at the beginning, if you are a big fixer and your team wants they'd like to augment other things with BigFix information, being able to use Explorer to extract that information in the right value, in the right format, and marry it up with other data in your environment is a huge win, and alongside all of the web reports and other ancillary benefits. So thank you all very much for joining us today. I did post the blog post that we shared to our forum. We'll also post Gary's PDF document to our forum for reference after this. And yeah, I imagine we'll see a whole lot of new questions and conversations going on in our forum and our Slack on BigFix Explorer. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gary.